This is the first story time video. I've had a lot of people ask me about FK Arts and what does the FK stand for, what does it mean, where does it come from? Not just since I started the channel, but especially since I started the channel, it's something that people have asked, and a lot of people probably don't know and haven't bothered to ask. Some people have made assumptions as to what the acronym means and what it is and stuff. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to clear that up and talk about the origins of the name. Just the name, and maybe in another video we'll talk about the origins of my art practice and how I got interested in art and stuff. I would like to tell those stories as well, but for now we'll stick with just the name FK Arts. So in order to tell you about that, I need to tell you a little bit about graffiti culture, I guess, but not a lot. So in Saskatoon, when I was writing graffiti, as some of you may already know, that was kind of my start with visual art in a way. The last name that I was using for tagging, I wanted to attach a crew name to that. So basically, FK was the initials or acronym, I would say, for the crew. In crews that I've been associated with in the past before that point, and just the way that things kind of worked. Basically, you want to think of a crew as being like a team or a group. You have the umbrella of a name for that group, and then you have your individual identities and names and pseudonyms and tags underneath that. Especially if you're playing the game, I guess if you're playing the game of getting up and that's your purpose in tagging and stuff, then you were just affiliated with that group. So you could have people in different areas of the city that are putting up their own personal name, but also putting up the crew name and be like, oh wow, this crew is getting up everywhere, rather than like having one person. I mean, that's kind of the goal too, for one person to kind of get up as many places as possible. I mean, if you're playing that game, like I said, there's crews that are countrywide, some internationally, some are just in a city or a province or whatever. Again, if you're playing that game, then the goal is to kind of get up as many places and as far as possible. So there's like some people in Saskatoon that are part of Freightophiles, which if you've ever been at a train crossing somewhere in Canada, then you've probably seen some Freightophiles people. Well, doesn't matter who, but some people in Saskatoon, BC, some other places for sure. But that would be an example of just like, oh wow, like Freightophiles is like a big name on trains, especially within Canada. So that's kind of a little bit about crew names and things like that. You just want to have that association or that team with like-minded folks, and then they can get up in other areas that you might not be. So that group or that crew would need a name for everyone to recognize, like, oh, that thing I'm seeing everywhere. Like, oh wow, that person or that group has people in this province and that province in this city or this side of the city or whatever. So the last name that I chose for tagging, like I said, I wanted to also start a small crew. I had never really done that before. Like I had been associated with other people's crews, and I had like fake crews, I guess, where like I had a new name and I wanted to associate that with like a crew that really was just me. But there was a couple people involved with me last time, but not very many. So again, this is like 2007 ish. I want to say that I started this, then it took place. So I don't really remember. I mean, it was like 13 years ago, right? So I don't remember all of my thought process into making that name. But kind of similar to how I made the last name I was tagging with, which we'll maybe talk about another day. I started thinking about the letters first, and like I'm going to be writing these letters. It's going to be a visual thing, and like for me, graffiti was not just like throwing crappy styled letters up. Like it was always about stylized letter structure. So I wanted to make sure that these letters that I'm working with are letters that I can play with a lot. Like some letters lend themselves better to some people. They feel like, oh, I can get really creative with an S, but maybe not with an O, and still make it look like an O anyway. So I was also thinking of really like abrasive letters as well. And again, this is all just from my recollection now. At the time, obviously it would have been a lot clearer as to what I was trying to do. But I think I think I started with K, and I was like, wow, K is like, there's a lot I can do with the letter K. And like uppercase or lowercase, it's exactly the same pretty much. But I liked that. I liked that, we've basically got like you want to call it like a spine and two limbs coming off it in a way. And I thought I could play with that in a bunch of different ways and make it visually interesting if I were to tag that letter somewhere. And I also thought just about how we say that letter, and that letter being really strong. And then I don't remember exactly how it came about, and then I thought of F, and I was like, another really strong thing, like if we're talking about profanity, right? And so then I thought of FK, and I really liked that pairing, and I tried some things visually, tagging some stuff, and I liked the lines that I could make and how they fit together, and I just thought, you know what, like usually crew names are like 3 letters for like an acronym, but there's some with 2, like TB, Bees Boots, and so I was like, you know what, no, I'm just going to do that. I'm just going to have FK. And I liked that a lot. I liked the way that I could say it out loud, FK. I liked how it looked visually. I liked that when I deconstructed what those letters kind of represented to me, because like an F is like saying it out loud, or thinking of an F by itself isn't like super strong. It's kind of a soft letter to say, but K is the opposite. However, if you're thinking about words associated with F, or you could just say F, you're like F this, then that's a strong sentiment. So, this is more retroactively thinking like, oh, I guess you could fill in the blanks of that F to the K, which is an association I don't like right now, since people have made their own assumptions as to what FK arts means. But at the time, what I had that those 2 letters represent, because again, I keep saying it's an acronym or like initials, because that crew name isn't just letters; those letters stand for something. So another Saskatoon example, HTS. The main thing that they wrote was here to stay. So that was a main thing. So for me, FK, I liked Fatal Kiss. So when I think of FK Arts, I don't think of Fatal Kiss anymore. To me, FK Arts is just something else, but which we'll get to. But Fatal Kiss was kind of like my edgelord side. I don't know. I just really, really liked that metaphor, that symbolism, the things that was saying, like how a kiss can be so many things. I mean, if we talk about art and we talk about my use of certain colors and stuff, for a long time in my color palette I was using like white, black, and crimson. That crimson was representing blood, and to me blood represents so many things, because it's like life and it's death and it's violence and it's birth and it's all these things that it represents. And to me, a kiss could be that too. A kiss can be soft and romantic and love and beautiful, and it can also be more aggressive. I mean, it could be passionate either way and still be aggressive and still be like beautiful, and it could be soft and whatever. So a kiss by itself, it doesn't always have to mean one soft, nice little kiss. It could be so many things. But I mean, the fatal part obviously isn't necessarily as open to different interpretations, I guess. But playing with just that idea of a fatal kiss and just like what that means and how that could be interpreted. I think a kiss is also making contact with something, right? So I mean, if someone's delivering like a fatal kiss, you know what I mean? Like, then that could be like the last kiss someone gives you before they terminate your relationship, or or they, it's almost like if it's like the Godfather type thing or whatever, like a stereotypical mob thing. They give you a kiss on the cheek and they pat you on the back and they walk away, and then somebody kills you. So I just like the notion of playing with that, and like I said, it's, I don't know, probably my more emo part of me that's still in my core, that I just really liked thinking of that and thinking of imagery and visuals and what I thought of when I thought of a fatal kiss. And like, just the word fatal, to me, I think of femme fatale and that kind of thing too. So to me, it was it just really represented me in a lot of ways, with like playing with how you can interpret different things, like a kiss, and like aggressive parts, soft parts, romantic parts. So that's what I thought of for me. I was like, hey, I'll just have it as fatal kiss, and being like, if I'm tagging something and I'm making contact with that thing, then that was the fatal kiss, I guess, of my spray paint to that wall or power box or bridge or whatever it was. So that's kind of how I thought of that name. Other people, sometimes when you are given like well, not given, but I guess if you enter into a crew, then I mean, some people start to make up their own acronyms. So I remember there was also previously to that, there was this thing that a buddy and I started That was SOS, and it was like Soldiers of Silence and like stuff like that. And it's, I don't know, it's just a fun thing to think of, like, oh, what could I use those letters for to represent me and how I feel in this crew. So I remember like Fresh Kings was what someone else in the crew was writing for a short time. For FK, like, I mean, that's not what they were writing as for their tag, but if they were going to write out the whole crew name somewhere, which you would do sometimes, then I mean they were writing Fresh Kings. I remember one thing that we wrote was F Cops, except 3 Ks for cops, and it wasn't just the F; it was the full sentiment there of the F. So that was something too that was more of a political statement that we were making at that time, which is a whole other thing like I'll talk about. I'm sure a lot of these stories will involve my history of graffiti and things like that. I'd like to go back to Saskatoon to shoot some of that stuff and talk about it, but anyway, I think that's the majority of that story of FK came out of this crew name this crew that I started in Fatal Kiss was what it was. I mentioned just a few minutes ago that when I think of FK Arts, I don't think of Fatal Kiss Arts. That's not what it is. To me, that FK was just when I started the Facebook page. Like me as a visual artist, it all really started from graffiti and my graffiti life. So I just extended, like, when I stopped doing illegal graffiti and started doing legal graffiti on canvases and whatever else, then I wanted to sell that and like post it somewhere. And I was making other stuff at the time, like abstracts, shortly followed after, which I'll talk about more of how that evolution of my artwork evolved or came to be. But FK Arts was just paying homage to those roots, I guess, of that graffiti is what got me interested in visual art to begin with. Like, that's what really did it for me. So I was like, oh, let's just take that FK that I was using illegally, and now I'm doing legal stuff, and let's just take that same name, though, and transfer it over here, and that's going to represent me. There was a small period of time where I was having someone who was working with me, so it was like a partnership. They didn't really like that name, FK, but it was kind of just there already, so we used that. And that's why, if you'll notice at the end of my videos, it says fk.artists@gmail.com, because at that time that name was representing more than just me. It was kind of like a crew name again, that it was like a team name, that there's different artists under the umbrella of FK. So I don't think that's probably going to happen again in the future, but I had thought, like, oh, maybe like I'll have other people that make legal stuff, because I knew people that did graffiti, but they also do legal stuff. And some people quit doing illegal stuff and only focused on legal stuff. Like, oh, maybe we could have like a collective, is what I was thinking at the time as well. And I don't mind that it just represents me and has for like a long time, because it still is a representation of me and it pays homage to that graffiti world that I was in for a short period of time, and how that got me interested in art. So FK Arts is really just like I said, to me, I don't think of Fatal Kiss immediately. Like, that's just something that's, I guess, that's there, that's in me, that I don't know. It still represents me, I feel, and how I feel about that name, but I just don't associate FK, Fatal Kiss. I just associate FK Arts as just a moniker for me, or FK by itself is just like a pseudonym for me, and I identify with that more than I do the name that I was using to tag at that time, because FK Arts, or FK, was just the crew name. So I definitely associate with FK much, much more than I do the name that I was tagging at the time. That's, I think, the best explanation I can give right now as to what FK Arts really means and where that name comes from. So it's, again, just kind of paying, or has always, it was just born out of my graffiti life, my illegal graffiti life, I should say, because graffiti could be done legally as well. That's how I feel. So that is the story of FK, the origin of that name, FK Arts. If you have questions that you want to ask, let me know. If you need me to tell a story about something because you're super curious as to how this came about or that came about, just comment. I would love to just continue storytelling if people are actually interested. This was more informative, a more informative story than it was like this action-packed, like, exciting story of me running away from cops or something like that, which there are those too. But hope to do more of these in the future, and that's that.